Hi everyone, and you are welcome to this lecture, Introduction to Files and Folders. In this lecture, I want to define some concepts that are related to operating systems before I start working with the operating system programmatically. In this lecture, I'm going to define what a file is, what a folder is, what a path is, and I will end up this lecture by a quick summary. So let's get started. First, let's start by defining what a file is. File is a container in a computer system for storing information, data, setting, or commands used with a computer program. So in simple words, we can say file is a container for data. Usually, in our operating systems, we deal with different types of file, like text files and graphic files. And if we want to know the type of the file, simply we look at the extension of that file. So for example, if the file name is hello.txt, we know that this file is a text file. You have to know that regardless what the file type is, files are stored as binary data, 0 or 1. That's it. The question now, as long as the data within files are binary, why when I read a file, I get useful content, like the image for example, or the letters inside text file? Simply because we have file standards. The file standard defines how to decode these binary data. So when I save text file as a binary data in ASCII standard or UTF-8 standard, this will help me to read this file later on and convert this raw data into something meaningful that I can understand. The same thing, when we hear that we have JPEG image or PNG image, this means that I have a standard help me to understand this raw data and convert this raw data into meaningful data that can be displayed, for example, within image editor. Now let's understand what a folder is. Folder is a directory in the file system of the operating systems in which we store and organize files and other subfolders. And this is what we usually see. Usually in our operating systems, we open folders or directories and we find within other folders or other files. So from this, we can understand that usually files are inside folders. The last concept, and it's one of the most important concepts that you have to be familiar with and understand very well, is path. What is the meaning of path? Simply, path is a route in the OS file system to a particular file or a particular folder. So from here we can understand that it's like the way that will guide me to the file or to the folder. So we have path for file and path for folder. Let's see an example. As you might have the following folder, which is inside the directory E, then Python beginner to advanced, then course material. So in this case, we call this part here within the red rectangle as a folder path. As you see here, it's E/etc. Now, within this folder, we have a file, and this file name is Python beginner to advanced requirements.txt, which is a text file. The path to this file is from here to here, and you can divide this path into three parts. The first part from here to here, which is folder path. The second part from here to here, which is the file name. And finally .txt, which is the file extension. Being able to understand these three components very well is very useful to understand OS module functions in future lectures. OS is a module that usually we use to work programmatically with our operating system. Now, after we see an example about a directory path and a file path, let me give you a very important point. You have to know that each operating system has its own format for specifying a path. So for example, when you want to define a path in Windows, you will say E, /, then etc. Whereas in Linux, we don't use /, we use /. So the path that I'm going to use, it's according to the operating system that my computer has. And this is quite important point to understand for future examples. In my case right now, I'm using Windows platform, which means I'm going to use / whenever I define path. But if you use, for example, Linux, you can use exactly the same example, just replace / with /. And that's all for this lecture. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this lecture. First of all, file has been defined, and as we see, it's just a container in an operating system for storing data. Folder is a directory in the file system to store files and other folders. And keep in mind that files are inside folders. Path is the route in a file system to a particular file or a particular folder. That's all for this lecture. Thank you very much for your time. And if you are available, join me in the next lecture.